Alright, I get it. Jesus. St Elmo builds. You're happy now. Right, before we begin, two things. It's actually really nice kind of being known for something. So when St Elmo came out, the first thing I got was just bombarded with messages being like, yo, oi, math boy, when are you going to do St Elmo builds? Show me the numbers. Yeah, it was actually quite nice and it's kind of weird to feel appreciated. Normally I just get shouted at. And the second one is builds for St Elmo. St Elmo is so utility and user friendly that pretty much any DPS build can work with it and it becomes a very good DPS build. This is kind of really where I would argue most of its power is. It's just kind of, it's like Scorpio. You can put it on anything and congrats, away you go. Not because of the talent, but those attachments. The only thing I would suggest is re-rolling a few items to get some crit chance off there, just to make sure you're not very much over. If you're like 61 or whatever, no harm. But if like you've got to take 2 rolls off and you're still at like 60% crit chance, yeah, you've got other things to worry about. On the plus side, depending on how you want to play, this is 2 extra rolls that you can put to anything you really wanted. Anything from armor regen. Okay, 2 rolls of armor regen aren't going to be that great. Same with like Hasbro, but every little helps. My suggestion would be to go for headshot, because you never know. If you get those headshots, an extra 20% on headshot, for example, takes pretty much most AR builds from like 75 headshot to 95, which is going to help out a lot of people, even if it is just 1 bullet per magazine hitting the head. It's extra damage. Every little helps. Now, obviously, if you are missing a crit damage roll from somewhere, that would most likely be your priority, but chances are you've got a lot of crit damage rolls everywhere anyway, so you've got crit damage, crit chance, and weapon damage. So if you need to take a crit chance roll off, I would suggest replacing the crit chance, assuming you have crit damage, with headshot. Right, on to the builds. But, third thing, I suppose. Full disclaimer, I have not tested everything. So if you have found some weird magical thing, the St Elmo's is like absolutely categorically outstanding, then I just probably haven't tested it. I'm going to show the things that I have tested and show them, obviously using the builder. I kind of feel like I should be sponsored by them at this point, Jesus. But I've done my best. I've tested like the big ones, really, although there's not that many of them. Nothing has really changed from like best of slot. The only thing you would really need to do is move around a mod slot. That's basically it. And obviously focus builds are out. They just aren't really worth it with this weapon. Simply just because focus doesn't proc, because the scope is like 0 times zoom. Anyway, up first we have Negotiators. Now the big thing that's changed here is the backpack. I've got Walker and Harris. The reason for this is that we end up over crit chance anyway. So this has 57 crit chance but 208 crit damage before even stacking the Negotiator's buff. Now to try and balance it out, I did put an M1A in there as well and put crit chance mods in. The highest I can get with this build is 47% crit chance and 205 crit damage. This is just purely because Elmo's has so much crit on it. So if we take a back step and put Ceska back on, we have replaced one of the rolls on the backpack, the crit chance roll, to headshot damage. This gives us on St Elmo's 61 crit chance, which isn't too much of a loss as we are only over by 1%, but we still have 208% crit damage. This, on the other hand, does mean that we have 51 crit chance on our M1A. Now, if you really want, you can change either of the backpacks to Fenris, but it will lock you into just using the AR. St Elmo's, obviously, which some of you will be fine with. The reason I've gone for Walker and Harris is because 5% weapon damage will apply to both of your weapons. Now, I am only really showing this just because I know people will be angry if I don't. Up to you whether you want to use blue or red or yellow cores really, but in terms of DPS with True Patriot, this is going to be your best bet. Sacrifice chest because we want that amp damage, because True Patriot really does lack actual damage, so we need to get more of it. If you don't want to run Sacrifice, I would suggest Walker and Harris with Obliterate, or even Glass Cannon. It's up to you, but this would be the highest DPS possible. And in terms of DPS for True Patriot meta, or best in slot really, that is actually going to be your best bet. Right, on to ongoing directive builds. This is the one I'm calling the impossible build, just because it's going to be a ball ache to farm. Golden chest with glass cannon, crit chance, crit damage, so we're going to need a unicorn so we can change the blue core to a red core. And then electric with wicked, crit chance, crit damage, and then obviously unicorn so we can change the skill tier to a weapon damage. The reason we would like to do this, and this is purely for a team setup, is this gives us 35% status effect while still giving us some decent amp damage from both glass cannon as well as the ongoing directive hollow round or hollow bullet buff. And due to the increase in status, it also allows for a more uptime on the bleed so that you or your teammates have a greater chance of proccing that damn pesky ongoing directive buff. It also allows for not that much of a damage drop off, like 6%, but you make up like 9% just through bleeding everything. Now, I'm not personally a fan of ongoing directive with St Elmo's. It does kind of mean you're near enough always having like infinite ammo because of the way in which the synergy is going to work. The annoying thing is though, is it's not actually a bug. You are only able to have one set of special ammo per weapon, per magazine. What this means is your first 2 magazines, essentially, you're going to build up the St Elmo weapon stacking buff thing. The moment you get your electric bullet buff and then kill an enemy, you're immediately going to get the ongoing directive bleed ammo. From here, as long as you kill things, you will near enough have infinite bleed ammo. However, if you run out, by the time you run out, you would have built up enough stacks with St Elmo's to instantly reload into having electrified ammo. Kill something again, you're back to bleed. Essentially, it does mean that you basically have infinite special ammo, but where they cancel each other out and you can't have a electrical bleedy bullet, it kind of does defeat the purpose of 1, St Elmo, and 2, ongoing directive, which is a bit of a weird one for me. Now, if you are wanting to just make a standard ongoing directive build, this is pretty much going to be it. Grupo chest with glass cannon. You will need glass cannon. I'm aware of people who go, oh, but obliterate is fine. Due to the amplified nature of ongoing directive, glass cannon will just give you so much more. Glass cannon is just so much better and best in slot for ongoing directive. Now, you might also notice that the backpack is improvised, and this is simply just because when it comes to worthwhile backpacks, it really is dealer's choice. You could put Ceska there and replace 2 of the crit chance mods to crit damage. This will put you at 58 crit chance and like 170 crit damage, whereas this is at 60 crit chance and 137% crit damage. So Ceska could potentially be worth it. You could also run Walker and Harris for another 5% weapon damage. You could run Providence Piece for 15% headshot. All of them are really going to equate to mostly the same, or within like a few percent of each other, but it's more going to be down to how you want to play and whatever crazy idea you've got. You might also like Memento in there to give yourself a bit more survivability, considering we are running glass cannon. Umbra makes a surprise entry here. 4-piece Umbra initiative, contractor's gloves, Grupo backpack. I've left the talent out because I'm an idiot, but it should be vigilance. This actually does surprisingly well. It's just going to be managing the Umbra buff, which I will leave to you to decide whether you can or can't, or whether you should or shouldn't. Now, while we're on this, because I know someone's going to say it, Ninja Bike backpack does pair with this weapon quite well because of the crit on the weapon. The 20% crit chance, the 20% crit damage. You can get some surprising effects utilizing Ninja Bike backpack with this weapon. However, it is still nothing compared to what you're able to do with just non-Ninja Bike builds. You'll still be missing a backpack talent. Essentially, if you're going to make a Ninja Bike backpack build, you best be using St Elmo's because that's the only way you can get the most out of Ninja Bike backpack. There is also this, and I don't recommend it. I've already seen some people running it. One, you need to be able to get consistent headshots to proc Heartbreaker or use Scanner Pulse or the drone scanner thing or the remote pulse, another way in which to pulse them essentially. The issue is, because it is literally just a police M4 stats with 20% crit chance and crit damage, that does mean that Flatline will completely outperform it. Just to show, I've preferred this lovely sheet. Both of the weapons have the exact same stats, so 44191, they both have 850 RPM. All weapon damage is the same. The only thing that is going to change throughout both builds is the critical hit damage, of which Elmo has 161 and the Police M4 will have 117. The other thing that will change will be an amp 2. St Elmo's doesn't have an amp, whereas Police M4 with Flatline has another 15% amp. Now admittedly this doesn't look that impressive, but 5.6% more DPS is actually quite considerable when you start looking at endgame builds. I know a lot of people, they get ranty and ravey and all excited when they get like a 0.5% increase, so 5.6% in terms of endgame builds is actually huge. Especially when you start looking at like MMR builds, because 5 or 6% increase is literally a couple of million. It gets weird and crazy. Right, now to finish it off, the big boys. 2 striker builds. One's the one I've been using and everyone's been going, oh, what build are you using? It's essentially my exact same striker builds, but first let's actually have a look at the full strikers setup. Now, minus True Patriot builds, this is the build that actually gets the largest buff from utilising St Elmo's. Now it does have its drawbacks, and that's simply just because where we're not using a FAMAS, we actually lose quite a bit of fire rate. So a FAMAS with a decent damage talent will still outperform this, only by like 4%-ish, which again is actually quite a lot, but in terms of like overall output, like the bullet damage, St Elmo's will do more, but it's just the RPM where FAMAS is going to win in this situation. Now, the reason this build actually starts performing a lot better is simply now just because if we really wanted, we can start adding in a variety of different things to either add more situational damage or more utility. And that's really just about it. One of the builds that I previously showed was 4-piece strikers with contractors and foxes in another video, I mean. That build now actually gets near enough an 8% DPS increase simply just because of St Elmo's attachments. So running the Striker's chest and backpack has now probably never really been more viable. It's like the best time to actually start doing it with St Elmo's in its current state. Although again, to reiterate and really try and drive the point home, because Strikers is Strikers, something like a FAMAS with that juicy 900 RPM getting put to 1035, whereas a St Elmo's is going to get 978, there's pretty much nothing you can really do to make St Elmo's out DPS a FAMAS on a Strikers build, depending on your weapon talent. If you're not running a damage talent, St Elmo's will win by about 1.8%. If you are running a damage talent, FAMAS will win by about 4%. And it's not really going to matter too much on what damage talent you use unless you're an idiot and use measured, in which case you'll do about the same as St Elmo's. Right, now onto the build I've been running. 4-piece strikers, Grupo with Obliterate, Coyote's Mask. It's essentially the exact same build I've been running this entire time, but due to the attachment of St Elmo's, rather than be at 50% crit chance, I am now just at 60, just because I was running 10% crit chance on the weapon anyway. So build at base was 40, 10 from the weapon. Now it's build at base is 40, 20 from the weapon. As you can see, I'm going through the rolls here, but this is pretty much in terms of the 4-piece strikers with a different chest, the best in slot. Now you can use Ceska, dropping yourself down to 52 crit chance but getting 173 crit damage, but if you do this, you're either going to need to be 96% accurate with headshots or only ever play at medium range. Have fun, good luck, don't die, it's bad for the health.